I'm Nathan Johnson, the Contra Costa County Veteran Service Officer, and welcome to the 46th episode of Veterans Voices, titled Our Final Salute, Laying Our Loved Ones to Rest with Honor. We'll be talking with the National Cemetery Administration and a local funeral home to learn how military honors all comes together and what it means to the families. I'm grateful to be joined by my co-host, Gold Star father, Kevin Graves. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Nathan. Good evening.
Yeah, good to see you again.
The purpose of Veterans Voices is to explore the issues that matter most to the veteran community and connect veterans and their families with resources and benefits. If you're at home watching and want to join our discussion, please feel free to call us right now at 925-313-1170. Our phone lines are open and we're excited to take your calls. You can also send us an email at veteransvoices@contracostatv.org or connect with us on Facebook at Veterans Voices 1.
Stay with us, and we'll be right back with local funeral home coordinator, Dea Kishore.
Got it.
Right now.
Before we get started, we'd like to take a moment to recognize the service of local Marine Corps veteran Salvador Llamas. Salvador joined the Marines in 1992 and served on active duty until January of 2000. After September 11th, he returned to service and deployed twice to Iraq in 2003. Salvador is currently the Chief Operating Officer for the Alameda Contra Costa Transit District, AC Transit, here in the Bay Area. Semper Fi, Salvador.
Now we would like to welcome local funeral home coordinator, Dea Kishore. Dea, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Kevin.
Good to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And so tonight we're talking about the final honors benefit and the cemetery benefit for veterans and their family members. But before we get started on that, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been in the funeral industry for about almost 12 years, and I really didn't know what I was getting into, but now that I'm here, I love it. I love helping families. It's a great honor to be there, to walk families through this time in their life and giving a final send-off for their loved ones.
So what's your specific job there?
I am a certified funeral director, so I help families coordinate and arrange the funeral services for their loved ones. That would be burial or cremation services.
And I would imagine that your experience is a tremendous benefit to the families, because a lot of nobody really prepares for it. Depending on the situation, of course, whether it was expected, unexpected, whether it's later in life or not, there's a lot of questions that have to be answered.
Yes.
It's very difficult.
Oh, yeah. And either if you don't have the answers, you have to go look for them, and you need to be resourceful for the families.
Difficult job. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. You know, not a lot of people like to talk about death, and not a lot of people like to think about a family member dying. But talking about it, I think, kind of just makes it maybe a little bit more comfortable and put a little bit people more at ease. So we want to talk about two things tonight. We want to talk about the process and the benefits, and we want to talk a little bit about you, just so people can help we can help people understand who the people are behind this very important work. So I want to start off with more of the benefit. You're a local funeral home in the community here, and so people come to you generally when someone's recently deceased, or do people typically come to you and plan things out in advance?
Both. So there are families that would like to get information ahead of time. They would like to know what are their options as far as a burial or cremation service for their loved ones.
Okay.
Even at a time where someone has passed away. Some families don't know where to start. So we give them the options of if they would like to have a burial service with a casket present, or if they want to have a burial with the urn placement and urnment.
So I imagine it's early on in the conversation where you ask about military service.
Oh, yes. Yes. So we will ask them if their loved one was a veteran. And then from there, we'll ask them questions. For example, do they have their DD-214 or honorable discharge? If they don't have it, how we can help them obtain those documents.
And there are expedited ways that can occur because of the situation, correct?
Yes. Yes, we can also go through the eligibility process, or we can just request the documents from the VA. Yes.
And so in some instances, people probably are unfamiliar with what a DD-214 is, probably don't know specifically what the criteria is for being a veteran. To what extent do you have to educate people on veteran status, on what a DD-214 is, and before you even help them obtain it?
Yeah, so sometimes we say, you know, your loved one should have it in a safe place. It's their discharge paper from the service. It shows their rank, what they've done, and what they've accomplished in the service. You know, sometimes we have veterans that have earned a Purple Heart. So, and if they can't find those documents, then I would walk them to the process of the funeral home requesting those forms, or how to go online and request for those documents.
Now, I've learned over the years that it can be difficult for some people to, during the time of a deceased veteran, or the death of a veteran, excuse me, it can be difficult to acknowledge military service, to have things like funeral honors, or to have the folding of the flag, or anything that comes along with that benefit. Do you ever find that military service is too touchy of a subject to bring up?
For some families it is. Some families do say, no, it's too much for us. We don't want honors. We don't want a flag. And so we will also let them know that if they don't want the honors at this time, we can always arrange for a flag to be presented to them at a later date at their residence.
And that's really great, because I think that there can always be a discrepancy within the family of who wants what was important to one member of the family may not be to the other.
Yes.
And so offering that option can help satisfy both sides without creating an issue.
Yeah. And then, you know, for a spouse, it may be a lot to take in for them. So at that time, they'll say, no, I don't want military honors. So then we'll say, okay, we can even, for example, if there's a cremation service and they don't want honors at the service, we can have honors at a later date at the cemetery when we do the placement of the urn. Okay. So we can always do that. We can make other arrangements for the families.
Do you work with a specific cemetery here in the area, or there's several of them, I think, in East Contra Costa County, correct?
As far as the national cemeteries? Or?
No, if they choose to be buried in a private cemetery.
Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah, there's several different cemeteries locally, Antioch, Concord.
So that's a different process for you, though, right? If
Yes.
you're working with a private cemetery, or if you're working with a national cemetery, that guides how you do things to a certain extent?
Correct. So private cemetery, the families will make arrangements with the cemetery's purchase property. Whereas I would, if I'm scheduling a veteran's burial, I will have to call the National Scheduling Center along with the DD-214 or honorable discharge. I will submit those forms to them. I will provide information of the veteran and the spouse. So at a later date, the spouse can have a burial as well. They are entitled to a burial.
This is all very interesting for me, because this all, as most of our audience knows, I'm a Gold Star dad. My boy was killed over in Iraq in 2006, and so this all happened behind the scenes for me that I was not aware of at the time, because I was in a fog, and for an unexpected death, no matter whether it's an illness, a training accident, KIA, no matter what the cause of death is, we don't know what questions to ask. We don't know what direction to go, and we rely heavily on the professionals to help us, guide us through that procedure. And I have to say that for me, it was a horrible experience, but I was given the right advice to help me through it the best I possibly could.
So sometimes it comes unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And what differences do you find in terms of people who have been able to prepare in advance for this type of event? You know, sometimes someone is aging and you can prepare, but sometimes you can prepare just in case it happens earlier than expected.
Yep. It's about educating everyone of the process, what they're entitled to, what are their options, what are their wishes. We definitely want to make sure we honor their loved ones and also honor the families.
Now, we have just a couple minutes, but I want to remind our audience that tonight we're having a very difficult discussion. We're talking about veterans and laying them to rest in a cemetery and providing them with final honors. And we know this is a difficult topic for people to talk about in general, but we want to invite you to participate in the conversation as well. We have Dea from a local funeral home here, but we have many in our audience that we'd like to have your comments or your questions. Please call us, send us a message on Facebook. We'll include you in this conversation tonight. I want to talk a little bit about you, though, because we talked a lot about the nuts and the bolts of this whole process. What is it like to do this job? It's got to be difficult.
It's difficult, it is challenging, it's emotional, but at the end of the day, it's fulfilling.
Okay.
It feels good to help someone. And not everyone knows what to do. Not everybody knows how to let go of their loved one in a dignified manner. So it feels good to help them with those decisions.
Well, I want to thank you and all the people in your industry for being there for the families and for providing the guidance, the support, and answering those questions that a lot of us didn't even know we had to ask.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, very important. You say challenges. What are some of the biggest challenges you think in doing this?
Some of the challenges could be time constraints. Some families just don't know what they want to do as far as a burial or cremation.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could be finances. You know, those are some things that are, like you said, unexpected. So they don't know what's to come in the coming days.
Yeah.
Ordering flowers and just the expenses of what to do.
And so you say rewards of helping them. When do you feel, in your job, where's that point in which you feel satisfied of helping someone? Is it right in the beginning when you're approaching them in their most vulnerable moment, or is it at the end when their loved one's been laid to rest, or is it somewhere in the middle?
It's, I would say, towards the middle and the end, knowing that you were able to get military honors in a timely manner. When they come back and say, that was a beautiful service, you know, I know my loved one's smiling. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you recommend to someone who maybe is not faced with this today, but may be faced with this kind of issue tomorrow? What would you recommend to help make the process easier for them?
I would say it's always good to get the information. Educate yourself a little bit just to know what you want, not just for yourself, but for your loved ones. What do you want to leave?
Yeah.
Preparation.
Yeah, always prepare.
Daya, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Nathan.
Grateful to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. We will be right back with guest Brad Phillips, the Executive Director of the NCA, the National Cemetery Administration Pacific District. Please stay with us.
Now we would like to welcome Bradley Phillips to the show. Bradley, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you're the Executive Director of the Pacific Western District. I probably didn't say that correctly, but give us an idea of the scope of that. How big is that area?
Oh, the Pacific District encompasses New Mexico, Arizona, California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Idaho, Alaska, and Hawaii.
Okay.
It's about 40% of the land mass of the United States.
So before we dive into the nuts and bolts of the process that you're involved in providing final burial honors for veterans, give us a little bit of an understanding of your background. I understand you're a veteran.
Right. I am actually a third-generation veteran. My grandfather and father were veterans. Retired from the Army in 2001, worked as a contractor, supporting the Army for a couple of years, and then came back and worked as a Department of the Army civilian for about 7 years. And then as I was working for the Army as a civilian, I was selected for a VA leadership program, and then I moved over to VA, actually starting with VBA as the Assistant Director of the Winston-Salem RO, and I spent about 2 years there before I moved out here to Oakland.
Well, thank you for your service.
My pleasure.
So at what point did the National Cemetery Administration become a part of your life, and how did that transform from your military service to federal civilian service?
Well, I think like a lot of folks, running or being involved in cemetery operations was never anything that I had planned to do. And it was a pleasure to get the job out here. But each day that I spend working out here in California in the Pacific District supporting veterans and their family members, the more I come to appreciate and love the job that I have. It's just a great joy to go out there and help veterans and their families at generally the worst point in their life.
Now, your main headquarters of your district is in Oakland at the regional office on Clay Street there, is that right?
That's correct.
Do you guys have public contact at all, or can folks call you there? Can they come into your office and talk about the National Cemetery Administration?
They do,
Okay.
and they can. They can also call our scheduling office if they have questions about our scheduling office, and that's 1-800-535-1117, or they can call us at 510-632-6270, and we'll try to answer their questions.
That's great.
How many cemeteries are in your district, national cemeteries?
I have 14 major cemeteries and 6 satellite cemeteries, and we're in the process of opening up 2 additional rural cemeteries in Idaho and Nevada, in addition to 2 more urban cemeteries in Los Angeles and at Alameda Point.
Right, at the columbarium there. We were just talking about that today.
They're at the what used to be the Alameda Naval Air Station.
Right. Well, what's the time? What's the time frame on that being completed here?
We're looking around 2022 for phase 1 to be completed and opening up. Initially, phase 1 we are expecting around 25,000 niches with an end goal of over 300,000 niches.
But it's strictly columbarium at Alameda because of land use there. Yeah.
That's correct.
Well, I want to remind our audience that we're having a conversation tonight about final honors for veterans, the dignified way that we bury them in a VA National Cemetery, and we provide final honors for them. And we have a caller, and so we have Carl from San Ramon. Carl, are you with us?
I am.
Carl, welcome to the show. How can we help you?
Yeah, I have a question for the guest that you had on, the woman guest. And I wanted to ask if there was booklets or pamphlets that would explain both the process for a local cemetery as well as the national cemetery. I mean, there's 2 different ways, as the lady mentioned, and I wanted to find out whether you have some written information that will kind of give you more details and kind of provide you a path for, you know, getting a person buried at either the local cemetery or the national cemetery.
That's a great question, Carl. Thank you so much. So, Dia's off the stage, but Bradley, maybe you can help our caller.
We do have a pamphlet that outlines the process for scheduling a loved one at a burial for a national cemetery.
A national cemetery, okay. And then what about for a burial at a private cemetery in terms of getting the headstone and the marker or the medallion and the burial flag?
Oh, great question. To distinguish between burial in a national cemetery and a private cemetery, at a national cemetery, we will provide the grave site, the headstone, or the marker, a grave liner, which goes over the casket if it's a casket burial, and perpetual care. If a veteran or a family member decides to be buried or interred at a private cemetery, we will provide a headstone or a marker or a medallion to go on their private headstone.
So, Carl, I think you're still there, and I want to invite you,
Yep.
Carl, to come into the Contra Costa County Veteran Service Office. You live in San Ramon, and what we can do is we can help you understand your your burial benefits, both burial at a VA National Cemetery, and then if there's burial at a private cemetery, what additional benefits come with that. And we can connect you to the National Cemetery Administration, and we can connect you to DIA so that you can get further information as well. Thank you so much, Carl, for calling on the show. Appreciate that.
Can I have one more short question? I
Sure,
just wanted to
absolutely.
ask, when a wife and a husband are to be buried, and not necessarily at the same time, but in some sequence of time, does one get buried on top of the other?
Very good question. So veteran and the veteran spouse are both eligible for burial, but how does that work? I know a lot of veterans want to know, can the veteran spouse die first? And how does that arrangement work at the cemetery level?
Well, thank you very much, Carl, for that question. I really appreciate it. It's somewhat touching to know the number of spouses out there that are unaware that they can be buried with their veteran loved one.
In fact, some veterans may choose not to be buried there because they're concerned their spouse can't be buried with them.
That's correct.
Right? Which is incorrect.
That's correct. But usually a spouse and the veteran are interred together.
Okay.
Or if the spouse has eligibility of their own that they have served and they meet our eligibility criteria, they are authorized their own gravesite as well.
Okay, so if both the veteran and the spouse are veterans, they can be buried individually, or the spouse and the veteran can be buried together in the same burial plot. Carl, thank you so much for calling in, and we hope that others watching this show can call in with questions or comments just like Carl did. I think it's important for us to have this conversation. We have a question here from Jeffrey that came out over Facebook. We're at Veterans Voices 1. What is the busiest cemetery in your district? This is the Pacific Western District.
Actually, the busiest cemetery in NCA is in the Pacific District, and that's Riverside National Cemetery.
Okay.
Within the Pacific District, 6 of the top 16 busiest cemeteries in NCA are located in the district.
Okay, okay. And so when we understand the work that goes involved, the work that goes into this, when we say a cemetery is busy, approximately how many burials will a cemetery like Riverside or like Dixon do in a day?
Riverside does a little over 8,000 interments a year. So their burial rate can fluctuate from 35 a day to 65 to 70 a day, depending on, with Mondays and Fridays obviously being the busiest days for convenience for the family.
Yeah. The burials on the weekend, that you don't do burials on weekends at national cemeteries, is that correct?
We've started a pilot program, and Riverside is one of the pilot cemeteries that we are doing cremation only one Saturday per month. It's the first Saturday of the month.
Okay, that's new.
And that's just, for the Pacific District, that's just Riverside that's taking part in that.
Now, I think the work that you do is very important, and I think it's also important that you're a veteran in this line of work. So tell us a little bit about what this means to you to be in this role, providing these final honors for veterans and their spouses, and what would you do to encourage another veteran who's retiring from 20 years of military service, such as yourself, who may be taking an interest in this, working for NCA?
Oh, thank you. I've got so many stories about that. About 75 to 77% of the team here in the Pacific District are veterans. So we're veterans serving veterans. A lot of our team members actually have loved ones that are interred in the cemetery that they're working at. This is a great job. My son is a active duty Air Force. He's looking at retirement, and I've already started talking to him, and he started talking to me about coming to working for the National Cemetery Administration. It's a great mission. We're out there every day helping families and veterans at a very difficult time in their life. And it's very rewarding at the end of the day to know that you have touched a family and made their most difficult day a little bit easier for them.
Yeah, I've always liked interacting with the National Cemetery Administration. I shared that with you earlier. It seems that the National Cemetery Administration is very passionate about the work that they do. And you have a certain way of treating people with dignity and respect. So thank you so much, Bradley, for being on the show today. Wish we had more time to talk with you. But again, all that you and your team do, thank you.
Thank you for having me here. It's been a pleasure.
We wanted to take a quick moment to tell you about next month's show. In June, we will be talking about scams directed at the veteran community. According to AARP, veterans are twice as likely to be targeted for scams. Scams can range from requests to donate money to offers to improve the terms of a VA loan, and many others. Please tune in to hear what agencies like the Post Office are doing to help prevent members of our community from being scammed. We'll be right back after this short clip about the importance of veterans recording their DD-214 with the county.
Hi, I'm Nathan Johnson with Veterans Voices. If you're a veteran and you're wondering where the best place to get a copy of your DD-214 is, I'm here at the Contra Costa County Clerk Recorder's Office, and we're going to talk to Paul Bergerino about the process for a veteran to record their DD-214. Hi, Paul.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for coming down.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. So how is the process for veterans to record their DD-214?
Well, it's pretty simple. They come down here to our office at 555 Escobar Street. They come over to the clerk recorders division side here, and they're able to, they come down, you have to have your certified document. You come down to our customer service representative, and they will give you a number, and then you go over to our customer service window.
So is this process free or is there a charge?
It's free. It's free for veterans and their families. It's a service we're happy to provide for the service that you've provided for our country.
That's great. And so what are the benefits? Why should a veteran record their DD-214?
Well, they should record it because in the event where the document gets damaged or lost or you just can't find it, it happens with anything really. They can come down here and they'll be able to make sure that it's recorded, it's on file, so that way if it does get lost, it gives you that peace of mind for yourself and for your family that you can be able to retrieve it when you need it the most.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. So after you record your DD-214 here at the Clerk Recorder's office, be sure to visit the County Veterans Service Office at 10 Douglas Drive in Martinez so we can help you understand your VA benefits entitlement. Thank you. Welcome back. We're having a very important conversation today about final honors and burial for our veterans and their family members. Now we'd like to welcome James Mitchum to the show. James, thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So we've covered a lot of detail, but tell us a little bit about yourself. You are not only a veteran, but you're in charge of a cemetery at the VA.
That's right. I would think that the only title that I have that's more coveted than Director of a Cemetery is that of a veteran. Did 25 years in the Army and was able to travel around, did a deployment in Mogadishu, Somalia. Following retirement 10 years ago, stayed with the Department of Defense in Europe for 6 years. Then came over to the National Cemetery Administration in 2014, and I've been to a year's worth of training, 3 cemeteries to include Tahoma National Cemetery, South Florida National Cemetery, and now Sacramento Valley National Cemetery.
Well, thank you for your service and welcome to California. We know not too many people are excited to come to California, but we're glad to have you here.
It's great.
And a lot of people are excited to know that you're the new director at the Sacramento Valley National Cemetery. It's a very distinguished national cemetery here in our community, so a big responsibility for you.
Sure. And one of our newest. It was opened in 2007, I believe.
That's right. 2006, we started burials. 2007, we had a dedication, and we've grown.
And you have a lot of land available. You're one of there's plans for many years in the future to honor our veterans at Dixon. Is that correct?
Absolutely. In the large scale,
yeah.
560 acres. Right. Today, just under 100 of those are developed, and there are 2 expansion projects in the works. One is going to be completed by August of this year. That will add an additional 16,000 grave sites, and one right behind it, what we call a major project, is going to start in October, go for 2 years, add another 32,000 grave sites. Overall, we're going to be doing active burials for our veterans in Northern California for the next 100 years.
Right. Very good.
Now, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. The common citizen may not have an appreciation for what it takes to develop a cemetery, because we may just think, well, don't you just dig a hole in the ground and put the remains in there? But what does it take to actually develop a cemetery? What infrastructure do you have to put in place, and how do you have to prepare the ground or the above ground for the distinguished and dignified way of honoring a veteran?
Yeah, sure. So I think that leads chronologically into the 3 types of burials that we offer our veterans and their eligible family members. An in-ground casketed burial, a in-ground cremation burial, or an above-ground cremation burial, and what you mentioned as a columbarium. So our casketed sites at Sacramento Valley, the 95% of them are pre-placed crypts. So the crypts are already installed, and then earth put on top. And when you see the pretty green grass at Sacramento Valley, underneath is a gravesite section ready for burial. So
for the next development of that section as you expand to it.
There you go. Absolutely. So it's It's a little easier to excavate. We just removed 18 to 20 inches of backfill, lift up a lid, and then we can lower a casket. And there's obviously, as we were talking about earlier, there's room for 2 caskets. And then we do the backfill, put a layer of turf on there, and it's ready for visitation.
I want to talk a little bit, because I've had this experience. Not only is my son buried at Golden Gate National Cemetery with my grandparents,
Yes,
but
sir.
my father-in-law was just recently interred at Dixon in the, help me out, ossuarium? Am I saying that correctly?
Ossuary?
Ossuary.
Certainly.
Explain that to us a little bit, because I thought that was very unique.
Yeah, so an ossuary is a below-ground communal burial for cremated remains. And at Sacramento Valley, you may have seen there's a quote by Admiral Nimitz that talks about service members, they fought the war together, and now they rest together.
I think that's awesome. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that is a great quote, and it's etched in the wall right around the ossuary. Did I say that? Ossuary.
Very good. Very good.
And then a small plaque was put on the wall right close to that with his vitals on it.
Yeah, so that's our memorial wall, and so there's a couple of ways that we can honor veterans at our memorial wall. They're putting the ashes in the ossuary, and also anytime that a veteran's ashes are what we call not recoverable. You know, a lot of families like to spread ashes in the ocean or on the mountain or someplace that's familiar to the veteran. They can request for that veteran to be memorialized at our cemetery. Just last week, I was at a social gathering and talking to a family member whose father had been a veteran, and his remains were scattered somewhere, and their mother was deceased, and they still had her remains. So we're actually able to take those remains, do an interment wherever they wish, in the columbarium or in ground, and then we can also memorialize their father on the same headstone.
As an eligible spouse of a veteran.
That's correct.
Yeah, right.
So what goes into these decisions about burial? It must be difficult for a person to make a decision, and sometimes maybe that decision's articulated in a will and such, but sometimes it's not. So when a family decides whether it's a casketed burial, whether it's a cremation burial, or an
Ossuary?
Ossuary, what goes into that decision, and how do you help them?
Well, we always put ownership of the decision with the veteran or the veteran's family. We let them know that they're driving the bus.
Okay.
And whatever their wishes are. So we don't, I don't push one over the other. That's,
there's no cost savings or expanding the cemetery life. It's up to them and what.
Absolutely.
Most
And when we talk about cost, we don't talk about cost with the family and the veteran.
Yeah.
The veteran's already earned this. It's a benefit. One of my favorite discussions when we talk about the benefit, and a veteran or a spouse might ask, well, how much does it cost? I said, how long did you serve? 5 years, 6 years? It looks like it's going to cost you 6 years of service.
Right.
You're paid in advance.
Yeah. Now, at the national level, though, the services that are provided by the National Cemetery is the internment at the National Cemetery, and obviously the maintenance and upkeep of that cemetery to honor that. But the actual mortuary fees are not part of what's typically included?
And that's correct. So anytime a veteran, we do a lot of outreach, talk to as many veterans as we can. Of course, they'll come into the cemetery, do a little bit of pre-planning, have some discussions. And we'll make that clear.
Because it's important to plan for that.
It is. The benefit starts at the gates of the cemetery. So the actual grave site, opening and closing of the grave, perpetual care of the grave site, and the marker. Very, very key aspect of our services.
Nathan, you get this in your office quite a bit. You know, I've had discussions about this before, about the lack, and I'm not saying this in a detrimental way, but the lack of preparation for that time can make it so difficult for the remaining family members. And so you counsel a lot with people to make that decision and to understand what those costs are. Because some people think, well, my husband was a veteran, there's no cost. Well, that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, it's a common misperception that the VA is just going to cover everything. The VA will pay for it, and And yeah, we remind them that a significant portion of the cost of someone dying is the cost to bury them, a cemetery plot. So we remind them that the cemetery will provide them with interment at no cost. For some veterans who receive monetary benefits at the time of death, the VA provides them with a reimbursement for some of the expenses. Right. It's typically very minimal, though. It could be anywhere between $300 and $2,000. So veterans should certainly, and their family members, should come talk to the National Cemetery Administration and talk about these things. Not in a way that it's going to provoke anything to happen. Talk in a way that it's comfortable, that it could be years in advance, and that you can make those decisions of sound mind versus from any type of emotional mindset. So we're out of time.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
That went by
Such
fast.
an honor to have you here. Thank you again for your service. Thank you for being the director of the Sacramento Valley National Cemetery. And we look forward to seeing how that cemetery will grow over the years.
Okay.
Good
Thanks
seeing
for
you
having
again,
me on.
Jamie.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Next up, we'll be speaking with Arlene Salvador. Please stay with us.
So now we have Arlene on the show, and I want to remind our audience that we're talking about a very difficult but important topic tonight, and we want to welcome your questions and comments. Please call us or leave us a message on Facebook. Arlene, welcome to the show.
Oh, well, thanks a lot.
Welcome. Good
Yeah.
to see you.
So you work for the National Cemetery Administration, but first tell us a little bit about your military service.
Well, I served 21 years and retired in the Navy as a yeoman. Spent some time in Hawaii and Pearl Harbor, and well, I'd like to say that the Navy was just good to me. I went all to Washington, D.C., spent some time there too as well. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate your service. And how long have you worked for the National Cemetery Administration?
About 9+ years.
Wow.
All up in Dixon?
All up in Dixon.
So
Yeah,
since the
Sacramento
beginning,
Valley,
pretty
I
much.
should say.
Sacramento
Yeah.
Valley National
Sacramento
Cemetery, let's
Valley
call it what it
National
is.
Cemetery.
Happens to
Yes.
be located in Dixon.
That's correct.
But we have a question actually just came through that you can help with because you work closely with the families as they go through the process. Am I correct? Is
Yes.
that a big part of what
I do.
So we have a question that says, does the funeral home make contact with the services of flag folding and taps, and how is this arranged?
Well, military honors, we don't necessarily request it, but we can help the families and with concert with the funeral home to request that information. Phone numbers and everything, we all have that too. But sometimes families do have difficulty getting through, and we try to help them at least get the information and get through and get it for their loved one.
Quickly, give us a summary of what are the funeral honors? What is
Military
the package?
honors? Oh, okay. Basically, military honors is the playing of taps. And then in a case of maybe a cremation, it would be the unfolding, refolding, and then on a casket it's draped over. They do a fold and then they present that to the family.
Okay.
Now, there's also the fact if they're retired, they can get rifle volleys if they wish, and that's requested. If it's less than 20 years, we also have a volunteer rifles team, the Sacramento Valley National Cemetery Honor Guard, who can also provide honors for those veterans that did 20 years or less.
Yeah.
So at Sacramento Valley National Cemetery, you have honor teams that are available to you for internment there, but if they're being buried someplace else, they have to make those arrangements typically through a funeral home, and the funeral home usually has contact information for final honors.
Yes, yes, they have that
Very
information.
important, because you don't want
Yeah.
a veteran to be buried without receiving those honors.
No, honors are an important part of the, well, they deserved it.
Yeah.
This is information that sometimes people don't realize or don't even know that they're entitled to, and it's really important that if they can't find out the information just from their funeral home, maybe the funeral home's not experienced with working with veterans, they're more than welcome to reach out to us and we can give that to them.
Yeah. I've probably heard taps 100 times, but you hear
More
it.
times than I want to hear it.
Yeah, you hear it with the burial process. You know, it's not like a song that comes on the radio. So
No,
you always hear
it's
it
not.
along with this process of burying someone. It's just it grabs you right in the
does.
chest. and the folding the flag and presenting it to the family member. And I just think of how difficult that must be for both. Not only for the family to receive that flag, but for the person who's presenting that flag. And it should be done every time. And it's done perfectly every time. Every time I've watched it, it's almost that the folks that are doing this are there's kind of divine intervention, it seems like. So.
Nathan, there's something here you may be able to answer.
If a veteran, so a question from Gabrielle. Thanks, Gabrielle, for sending this question in. If you're a veteran that takes a break from service in general under honorable conditions, are they still eligible for a military funeral? Okay, so if a veteran takes a break, leave that question back up, please. Yeah. So if a veteran takes a break from military service, so I guess what I'm getting from that question is, if you receive a general under honorable discharge, are you still eligible for military funeral honors? And the answer to that is yes. Yeah. A honorable and a general under honorable are both discharged under honorable conditions, and it entitles that person. Well, the VA will find that person entitled to a military funeral. The types of discharges that are not eligible for burial, do you want to cover that real quickly?
Well, the dishonorable discharge, basically, we have experts in our call center in St. Louis, the National Cemetery Administration scheduling office that can be the experts. Basically, I defer to them because they know all the ins and outs and help make that determination.
And Brad gave that number out earlier because it's extremely important that they be called for availability, because people may have they may have a loved one that was buried in a certain cemetery. It may be a World War II vet, a grandfather or grandmother, as I did, and then want to have their loved one buried there also, and there may not be availability at that particular cemetery because some of our cemeteries are closed because they're full. Correct? That's
true. But as Mr. Bradley talked about, the 800 number, the 800-535-1117 is a really good number to call if you have a question. And if you're unsure, a question that's not asked is not one that's answered.
So to be clear to our audience, a honorable or a general under honorable conditions is eligible for VA National Cemetery burial. A discharge under dishonorable conditions, such as a bad conduct discharge and other than honorable or a dishonorable discharge, are not. Now, once the National Cemetery Scheduling Office makes determination of eligibility, where do you pick this up, and where do you help that family in making arrangements for burial at the National Cemetery?
Well, we have a scheduler who's Mike, who's really good at calling up the families and trying to verify, okay, he'll give a phone call either to the cemetery or the funeral home, excuse me, or to the family to find out and verify what exactly they want. Do they want a cremation burial in the columbarium or a cremation burial in the ground or even the ossuary? And after you make that phone call, you've actually built a little bit of rapport with that family so that you know what is it do they want. Maybe they'd never thought of military honors. And so now we can give them that information.
Talk a little bit about building that rapport, because I think you have to use a lot of yourself to really connect with this family, because they don't know you.
Indeed,
and they probably imagine that you don't know what they're going through. You couldn't possibly understand what they're going through. It's maybe how they feel.
This is true, and no information is better, gotten unless you get it from that person. To try to find, you ask them questions and try to listen more than anything else, because a lot of times they really do not know what they want. They're confused. It's the worst time in their life, and they're trying to handle something the best way that they can, and they don't realize, oh, well, I get military. Do I have to pay for that? No. You don't have to pay for that. And you don't have to have it at our cemetery. You can have it maybe at your home, or maybe, as Dea said, at a later date, because right now you just can't deal with it. And we totally understand that. It's important to think of our veterans and their families. It's their very first time they've ever stepped foot through our doors. And to realize that every day is going to be harder from this point on. And to let them know that we're there to listen. If you've got a question, call us so we can help you through it.
You guys are very gentle people. Very good listeners. Very kind-spirited.
We try.
How much does being a veteran play a role in your job?
I think it helps a lot. because some of the people, well, I say some families that come there don't really know much about veterans or understand. And sometimes their friends that come there that are veterans, it helps to have a sympathetic ear. At least we can empathize what it is that they've gone through, because we've served too, and we've done a lot of things.
There's a trust. There's a trust issue there.
There's a trust thing. Most of the veterans that work in our center, I mean, there are a lot of veterans around us, but the ones that work out there in the trenches, the staff, they're fantastic. Even down to the grounds crew.
Speaking of staff, because we're out of time here,
Yes.
James wanted you to be sure to do something.
I want to thank everyone at Sacramento Valley National Cemetery for the stellar job that they do, not only for the veterans, but ourselves too. We interact with each other every day.
Support
And I
each
just
other,
want to
yeah.
remind everybody too that Memorial Day is coming up, and this is the time that
Absolutely.
we
Great
memorialize our veterans.
Right.
We have a program on Saturday, the 26th at 9 o'clock. We're going to be placing flags on all the grave sites. We invite all of the community to come out and help
Get
do
involved.
that.
Sure,
And then
absolutely.
on Monday, of course, is Memorial Day at 9 o'clock. We have Travis Air Force Base, Band of the Golden West will be playing music.
Fantastic.
And a 1-hour program. And again, come out and see the flags. Learn a little bit about the veterans that are out
Yeah.
there. Read the headstones.
Great.
And be a part of it all.
Well, Arlene, we thank you as well.
Absolutely.
On behalf of everyone here at Veterans Voices and Contra Costa County Veterans Service Office, thank you to everyone at the
Thank you so
National
much.
Cemetery Administration and to the funeral homes like Pittsburgh Funeral Home who help our veterans and their family members be buried with dignity. So thank you for being on the show. Next up, Stephen Burchick had a chance to interview Art Gaskins, a local World War II veteran that recently turned 100 years old. Please enjoy.
Welcome. My name's Steve Burchick with Veterans Voices, and we're here today at the Veterans Memorial Building in Danville interviewing Art Gaskins for his segment of A Veteran's Voice. Art is a World War II veteran. Welcome, Art.
Thank you.
When did you join the Army, and what were the circumstances?
Well, in college, I'd put in my 2 years to be able to apply for Army Air Corps. They were taking probably about 100 pilot trainees a year. So you had a long wait to get your examination, and that happened to me. I didn't pass it. And I'd gone home to Dallas and was working, and the Selective Service Act, as it was originally called, came into being, and you could do your year and go back into reserve and back to school. Situation developed that in Europe, they began to call more and more people. And so I said, well, I might as well get in line. And I was called up in March of 1941.
Okay. How did you become an officer?
Well, after the Pearl Harbor situation and a talk with my commander in the school, it was easy for me to get approved to go to OCS. So I entered the armored OCS at Fort Knox and graduated there as a second lieutenant in July of 1942. At that time, I was assigned to a group to report to 13th Armored Division when activated and put back in school.
Okay.
Yes.
I understand the Black Cats landed in France in January 1945. And what was your impression of Europe when you first landed there?
Well, our first impression of Europe was not very good. We entered Port-au-Le Havre, Harv had not been part of the invasion. It was a little distant from Normandy, but it had been beat up very severely by the Germans. And a lot of the stuff that was handled mechanically, like cranes and so forth, didn't exist. Everything was barges and handwork. That slowed down our getting all our stuff together once we got on land, and we were billeted in a village called Saint Saun, and we continued some ground training there. And you must remember that the end of the Battle of the Bulge was still partially active, and some of our artillery units and got a little experience there battle-wise, because they didn't have to go way up front. They were back to still do their targeting anyway. Eventually we got lined up, and our orders marched us across France, and we wound up at the Ruhr Pocket, it was called. Montgomery with his army on the north, and Patton with his on the southwest side, had been stopped before the Bulge started. Eisenhower was afraid that they would run so far out it would be impossible to supply them. So he stopped them and worked on the support system for them and all.
Were you part of the attack in April 1945 at the River Sieg?
Sieg River was a major river in the industrial area, the Ruhr, and it dominated the let's say the use of terrain. There was a couple of infantry divisions, the 13th Armored Division, and some anti-tank outfits that were given the job of getting over the Sieg River, getting rid of the Germans on the high side, because they were looking down at every place we could assemble to attack. And they had these 88 rifles, which were very deadly, and they knew how to use them. So we ran into a lot of problems getting across the Sieg River.
After crossing the Danube River, were you part of the operation that entered Austria?
Yeah, as we wound up there at the northwest or northeast end of the operation, we crossed the Danube, and it was a very rough crossing and physically, because the terrain was very wet and the river bottoms were bad, but using our own engineers, I say that the division-size engineers unit, we got across it and got onto some dry land.
Well, Art, that sounds like quite a career in the Army, and you've got some great stories.
It was an adventure, and I'm still putting stuff together for family records. I have a couple of stories that I'm trying to polish up and maybe present to our veterans groups here.
Well, I'm sure they'd love to hear them.
I have been adopted by the Vietnam veterans as an honorary member, and I do work with them. They are very much into work with the younger school children. And their guy, Bill Gibson,
Or Bill Green?
Bill Green, has talked to and worked with small children's groups of about 60,000 in the last 10 years.
They've met with a lot of groups.
Yeah.
A couple of quick questions. What advice would you give to young people today who might be considering military service?
I would tell them this. Number one, if you're really interested, get with the professionals and find out the truth. Get with veterans in your own family if you have some. But some of the most rewarding education opportunities are offered by the military service, equal to what you'd pay for at Stanford or Harvard or Yale. And this not only offers opportunities as far as expanding military things, but equipping you for civilian life when you retire from the military.
It sounds like some good advice. I understand that in a few weeks you're going to be celebrating your 100th birthday.
Yeah.
Any tips on how to live a long life?
Well, I've tried to study it. Historically, I didn't inherit any long genes. I think the most important thing is learn what moderation is. And you have to establish your own moderation based on what you have as an objective. But moderation in all things, keeping your mind active and keeping your physical ability within reasonable limits. But it has to be a constant thing, and it has to return something to you that encourages you to do it, because you run into some rough spots every once in a while. So the big thing is planning to keep both your mind and your body in good shape, and feel like you're putting a little bit back in the pot after you've taken it out.
Well, that sounds like some great advice.
Right.
Art, it has been a real pleasure to chat with you today.
Well, it's been fun talking with you.
We hope you enjoyed tonight's show. Before we want to direct you to a few events and resources, the Stanislaus Fly Fishers and Rivers of Recovery are proud to invite you to the 10th presentation of the Fly Fishing Film Tour at the State Theater in Modesto, California on May 30, 2018. All proceeds directly benefit Rivers of Recovery, helping us serve to combat disabled veterans through rehabilitative fly fishing adventures. Attendance is free for veterans, first responders, and students. Please visit riversofrecovery.org. There are many events in the local area on Memorial Day. Please visit calvet.ca.gov. Freedom Summit Sierra College is holding their annual Freedom Summit on June 30th for veterans and their spouses. The event is geared towards educating and supporting veterans, entrepreneurs, and business owners looking to expand. Please visit veteducation.org to learn more.
The Department of Veterans Affairs National Cemetery Administration implemented the pre-need burial eligibility determination program to assist anyone who would like to know if they are eligible for burial in a VA National Cemetery. VA is promoting pre-need eligibility determinations for veterans and their eligible family members to plan in advance for the use of VA burial benefits. Planning in advance for a veteran's or loved one's final resting place can eliminate unnecessary delays and reduce stress on a family at a difficult time. Veteran families have an increased confidence with their loved ones who are eligible for burial in a VA National Cemetery. Please visit sem.va.gov/pre-need to learn more. The Contra Costa Veteran Service Office is always there to help support you and your families. Please call 925-313-1481 to schedule an appointment or visit us right here at 10 Douglas Drive. As part of their mission to serve service members and veterans and their families, the VA provides valuable insurance benefits. Please check their website for more information.
Thank you. This has been Veterans Voices. Have a good evening.